Among all the infamous villains in Gotham, none carry a backstory as heartbreaking and unsettling as this one. He lost his body, his life, and worst of all, the woman he loved more than anything. And in the end, it cost the lives of thousands of people. He wasn't born a villain. He didn't crave chaos or power like the others. But his story is the kind that makes even Batman hesitate. Because out of all the monsters in Gotham, he's the one who had every reason to exist. This is the story of Victor Fries. Victor Bernard Fries was born sometime in the 1950s. From an early age, he had a deep passion for science, particularly the study of cryogenics. Fascinated by the idea of preserving things, he would often experiment saving animals, attempting to freeze them in hopes of making them better. Unfortunately, his obsession unsettled some people. His parents saw his experiments as disturbing, and his father, who already despised him, grew even more hostile. The beatings became routine. His home was a place of fear rather than comfort. Eventually, his parents decided they had enough and sent him away to boarding school, hoping to fix whatever was wrong with him. But things didn't get better at this boarding school. His peers avoided him, and even his teachers showed little kindness. It was a lonely and pathetic existence for poor little Victor. No one in life seemed to care for him, not a single soul. He had never known what it felt like to be truly loved. Until one day, he met a girl named Nora. Somehow, she chose him, and for the first time in his life, little Victor knew what it meant to be happy. Victor and Nora would eventually get married, and he would go on to become a scientist at GothCorp, but fate was cruel. Nora fell terminally ill, and Victor was desperate to save her. With no other options, he turned to the one thing he knew best, cryogenics. Just as he had experimented on animals in his childhood, he now sought to preserve his wife, freezing her until a cure could be found. Determined, Victor stole resources from GothCorp to carry out his secret project. GothCorp's CEO, Ferris Boyle, discovered the truth and stormed in with security. He ordered Victor to end the project, fully aware that doing so would kill Nora. Ferris Boyle wasn't about to let a small thing like saving a life get in the way of his own greed. Refusing to let Nora die, Victor fought back, even holding Boyle at gunpoint. But Boyle overpowered him, shoving him into a table of volatile chemicals. The chemicals changed Victor Fries forever. Victor's body could no longer survive outside sub-zero temperatures. The man he once was had died that day.
This is how I'll always remember you. Rest well, my love. The monster who took you from me will soon learn that revenge is a dish best served cold.
In his place, a new man was born. A man who went by the name of Mr. Freeze. With his genius-level intellect and mastery of cryogenics, he engineered a powerful freeze suit, one that not only sustained his sub-zero body, but made him one of the most formidable figures in Gotham's underworld. His suit granted him superhuman strength and the ability to generate intense cold, freezing anything in his path. Armed with his signature ice gun, he could encase enemies in solid ice, but despite his power, his sole focus remained unchanged, finding a way to save his beloved Nora. His quest for vengeance, however, led him to a fateful night in the fall of 1992, when he met Batman for the very first time. After years of planning, he was finally ready to take revenge on Ferris Boyle, the corrupt CEO responsible for the accident that ruined his life. But just as he was about to exact justice, Batman intervened. Batman couldn't let Freeze go through with the murder. After his very first battle against Batman, Freeze was defeated and Grant's life was spared. The man he hated more than anything was able to live another day. He was ultimately captured and sent to Arkham Asylum for the first time. There, he found himself among Gotham's worst: Joker, Clayface, Scarecrow, and others. He was no longer just a man on a mission. He was now officially part of Batman's rogues gallery. For the following years, Freeze would break free, only to be captured again. With each return, the man he once was faded further. His compassion for others eroded. Desperation drove him to more brutal methods. No price was too high. All that mattered was saving Nora. Gotham's people were nothing but obstacles in his way.
Think of it, Batman, to never again walk on a summer's day with a hot wind in your face and a warm hand to hold. Oh yes, I'd kill for that.
It was time for his final and most ambitious mission. There was no turning back this time. It was the most important mission of his life. It began in an isolated Arctic, where he lived alongside his preserved wife. After years of failure, he finally discovered the cure to save his wife: a simple organ transplant. The answer to everything he had fought for was finally within reach. He would finally be able to save his wife, Nora. But fate had a cruel sense of irony. The perfect match for Nora wasn't just anyone, it was Barbara Gordon, also known as Batgirl. Determined to save his wife at any cost, Freeze set his plan into motion. He would capture Barbara and hold her hostage to figure out how he would go with this procedure. He took her to a massive, abandoned oil rig, far from Gotham, where he intended to carry out the procedure. It wasn't long before her disappearance raised alarms. Investigators quickly pieced together the truth. Mr. Freeze had returned, and this time he wasn't holding back. Just as the operation was about to begin, Batman and Robin arrived, ready to stop him before it was too late. A fierce battle broke out, but everything changed when an explosion rocked the oil rig. The blast triggered a massive fire, rapidly spreading through the structure and putting everyone in danger. A pile of debris came crashing down on Mr. Freeze's legs, leaving him completely immobilized. At that moment, everyone had the same priority, escaping the oil rig before it went down, and took them all with it. With no other options, he used his ice powers to clear a path, helping Batman, Barbara and Robin escape. Batman took Nora with him too, promising to Freeze that they'd take care of her. Once they were safely on their way out, Batman couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Freeze wasn't trying to leave. He remained on the collapsing rig, motionless, accepting his fate. In that moment, he had made peace with the outcome. Deep down, he believed in Batman. He believed that somehow Nora would survive without him. And if this was how it ended, he was ready. But Batman wasn't. Refusing to leave him behind, Batman rushed back into the inferno. The oil rig was moments away from total collapse. He found Freeze clinging to a ledge. Batman fired his grapple, urging Freeze to grab on, until another explosion rocked the rig, sending debris crashing down. Freeze lost his grip, slipping further. He clung to Batman's grapple, struggling to pull himself up, but his body was too weak. A massive chunk of debris broke loose, striking Freeze. He plunged into the burning depths below. The rig, now beyond saving, gave in to the destruction. A final explosion erupted, engulfing everything in fire and smoke. Victor Freeze was gone. After the destruction of the oil rig, Victor Freeze was believed to have perished in the wreckage, but against all odds, he survived. Freeze had managed to escape, clinging to life by sheer willpower. Freeze eventually made it to dry land, finding shelter. As he watched a news broadcast from a distance, he saw the confirmation: Nora had been saved. In that moment, Victor's emotions overwhelmed him. His mission had been fulfilled. But despite the victory, there was no future for him with Nora, not the kind he had dreamed of. His body could no longer survive in normal conditions. Without sub-zero temperatures, he would perish. With a heavy heart, Victor turned away, and so he walked into the snow, disappearing into the wilderness. He was never heard from again.
I've been like this for nearly 50 years, and I haven't aged one day. I have become what many men have dreamed of, an immortal.
Against all odds, 50 years into the future, Freeze was still alive. But this wasn't the same man Gotham had known decades ago. His body had deteriorated over the years, so he preserved his own head, hoping that future advancements could one day save him. That chance came when Dr. Stephanie Lake, a scientist working under Derek Powers, approached him with an offer: a new life, in a new body, in a new Gotham. Using advanced cloning technology, she could restore him completely free from his past condition. And for the first time since his battle with Ferris Boyle, Victor had a normal body. Determined to make amends for the life he once lived, Victor vowed to use his wealth to help those he had hurt. He was ready to leave his past behind. At first, the world wasn't ready to welcome Victor Freeze back. To them, he wasn't a man seeking redemption. He was a monster. The descendants of his victims hadn't forgotten, and they made sure he didn't either. Protests erupted, condemning his return, but Victor didn't fight back. He listened. He understood their pain, their anger. He didn't make excuses. He begged for forgiveness. People started to believe in his change, and slowly, he began to win the people over. Just as Victor was beginning to rebuild his life, his second chance was ripped away. His new body mysteriously started to deteriorate. At first, he didn't understand why, but the truth was far more sinister than he could have imagined. His revival had never been about giving him a new life. It was an experiment. Dr. Stephanie Lake and Derek Powers didn't restore Victor out of kindness. They had been using him as a test subject the whole time. Derek Powers, whose own body was deteriorating due to his radioactive mutation, needed a solution. Before attempting the procedure on himself, they needed proof that it worked, so they gave Victor a new body first before they'd try it on Derek Powers. He was their guinea pig, and when his body started breaking down, they realized their experiment was a failure. With their test a disaster, there was only one option left. Victor had to die. But he refused to go down without a fight. He had one last solution. He resurrected Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze stormed into Powers' technology. His plan was simple: destroy the facility in a massive explosion, ensuring that Powers and his people could never exploit anyone else again. And Freeze was ready to die with it. But before he could carry out his plan, the new Batman, Terry McGinnis, intervened. Just as he was about to finish Batman off, an unexpected force intervened. Derek Powers himself, now fully transformed into a living radioactive monster. A brutal three-way battle erupted between Blight, Batman and Freeze. As the chaos unfolded, Batman managed to corner Blight, keeping him occupied just long enough for Freeze to make his move. With one final blast from his cryo-cannon, he sent Blight flying out of the facility. Now, only Freeze and Batman remained inside the crumbling building. The facility was seconds away from total destruction. The bomb Freeze had set already, sealing its fate. Batman no longer wanted to fight, he only wanted to save Freeze, but Blight had done too much damage. Freeze's suit was broken, and he could barely move. He knew there was no escape. With one final solemn glance, he spoke his last words.
You gotta get out of here, Freeze. The whole place is gonna go.
Believe me, you're the only one who cares.
Freeze, no!
Victor Freeze was gone. It was widely believed that Freeze died in the explosion, but his body was never found in the wreckage, and with a history as unpredictable as his, you can never be too sure. This was the story of Victor Bernard Freeze.